What's up, guys? Welcome back to Purple Peaches, the greatest BTS and gaming hybrid channel out there, and probably the only one. It's just Anna here today. Both Celeste and Shay are super busy right now. Celeste is going to school full-time, and she's also working part-time. She's almost done with her degree, so she's got a lot on her plate right now. And then, as for Shay, she's also going to school full-time, plus she's getting married! Just a few more weeks until she ties the knot with Cedric Diggory, and we are super hyped. So, while my friends have been doing productive things with their lives, I've been doing a lot of thinking, particularly about the Legend of Zelda series. A few weeks ago, the Legend of Zelda reached its 35th anniversary, and even though Nintendo didn't even seem to acknowledge it at all, they did announce a remake of The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. And I sort of have mixed feelings about it, but we're gonna talk about all that at the end of the video. Anyway, I've been thinking about how amazing the Legend of Zelda series is. It's probably my favorite video game franchise of all time. Every game is so unique, and each one feels like a grand adventure. I'm hoping that Nintendo has more planned for the 35th anniversary of Zelda now that the year of Mario is over. But again, we'll talk about all that at the end of the video. So my point is, if you're interested in trying out a Zelda game for the first time, there really isn't a better time than right now. However, due to the diversity in game styles, complicated lore, and sometimes controversial fanbase, it can seem a little bit intimidating to know how or where to jump into the series. So in this video, I'm going to go through and give a brief, spoiler-free description of each game, and then I'll give you my personal suggestion on which game you should start with. There's probably a million videos like this out there already, but I really wanted to give the internet my 2 cents on the matter anyway. Anyway, let's hop into it. So, the first game on our list is the original Legend of Zelda. This game was frankly revolutionary. This was the first game ever to introduce an open world to go explore. It was also the first game ever that allowed you to save your progress. Fun fact! In this game, you play as the hero, Link. Traveling across the Kingdom of Hyrule, your quest is to gather the 8 shattered pieces of the magical relic called the Triforce in order to save Princess Zelda from the evil Prince of Darkness, Ganon. The dungeons, the battles, the weapons, and the sheer length of the game was impressive to anyone who played it upon release, and it's still a super solid game to this day. You can't really go wrong with starting with the first game in the series, but if I were jumping into the series for the first time, I think I would personally want to try a more modern title, but it's up to you. Let's move on to the next game. So next up is Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link. So, kinda like Super Mario Bros. 2, this game is kind of a black sheep in comparison with the rest of the series. The story of Zelda 2 takes place directly after the story of the first game. In this game, Princess Zelda has fallen into a magical sleep, and in order for Link to awaken her, he must find and wield the third of the Triforce that is destined for him, the Triforce of Courage. In order to do this, Link has to find 6 magical crystals that will open the Great Palace where the Triforce sleeps. This game is different than the others in several ways. First, most of the game takes place in a side-scrolling world, whereas before it has a top-down view. This game also has some RPG-like elements in it, like experience points, which isn't really implemented into any of the later titles. You also have lives in Zelda 2, and if you run out, it's the return of Ganon. This game isn't bad per se, but it's just so odd and out of place compared to the other games in the series. Frankly, you aren't really missing much if you skip Zelda 2. It's stupid hard anyway. So let's move on to the next game. The third game in the series is A Link to the Past. This game is so good. Fun fact, Reggie Fils-Aimé, retired president of Nintendo of America, has said on multiple occasions that this is his favorite game of all time. Link to the Past returned to the top-down view of the first game. This game was also a revolutionary title. This was the first game that really introduced the traditional Zelda game formula. So before I go on, I want to break down what this formula looks like. In a traditional Zelda game, you travel from dungeon to dungeon, each of which are full of monsters to fight and puzzles to solve. In each dungeon, you typically find a new item that you use to solve the dungeon and battle the boss at the end. You can then use this new item to discover new places and secrets in the overworld. In traditional Zelda games, you're usually accompanied by a companion character that is essential to the story. This companion can give you advice when you're stuck on a puzzle or struggling to defeat an enemy. Another important element in a traditional Zelda game is that your character, Link, is quite literally a link between two worlds. Some examples include light and shadow, land and sea, sky and earth, or even human and beast. Something important that I should mention before we go on is that not every game features the same Princess Zelda, Ganon, and Link. In most games, you play as an entirely new reincarnation of a previous hero. Anyway, let's get back to talking about Link to the Past. In this game, Link must travel between the light world and the dark world in order to stop the evil wizard Ganon from resurrecting Ganon. Ganon. Yeah. This game is, like I said, super good. This game would probably be a good one to start with as it's the first truly traditional Zelda game. It leans a bit on the difficult side though, so if you're looking for an easy Zelda game as your first one, I don't think I'd choose this one. Okay, so next up is Link's Awakening. This game was the first Zelda game to come to a handheld console. Despite appearing on a tiny screen, this game was huge for its time. Link's Awakening is a content-full traditional Zelda adventure. This game's story is a little bit different than the previous games. It's not about saving the princess, finding the Triforce, or stopping Ganon. This game is about a mysterious island called Koholint Island. Link shipwrecks onto Koholint Island and soon discovers that the only way to leave the island is to awaken the magical Windfish. To awaken the Windfish, he has to gather 8 magical instruments hidden in dungeons around the island. This game is super charming and very fun to play. A remake of Link's Awakening was released for the Switch a little bit ago, and I highly recommend checking it out. Also, Link is so cute in the remake, just look at him. I think that this would be a good first Zelda game for anyone interested in checking out the series. Just keep in mind that the story is a little bit different in this game than classic Zelda games. Also, there's Mario enemies in this game. 'Cause why not? So, the next game on our list is Ocarina of Time. So, this game is probably the most famous game in the entire series. Ocarina of Time was the first Zelda game to take place in a 3D rendered environment. In this game, Link travels back and forth in time between his childhood and his adulthood on his quest to save Princess Zelda and awaken the 6 sages who can use their magic power to seal away the evil reincarnation of Ganon, Ganondorf. This game is amazing. This game is so amazing, in fact, that the community is still very active and fans are discovering new tricks and uncovering new secrets to this day. Whether it's your first playthrough or your 100th, there's no denying that your experience with Ocarina of Time will be magical. I absolutely recommend this game as your first. And if you're interested in playing a more modern version of the game, a remake was released for the Nintendo 3DS a few years back. Ocarina of Time 3D lost no magic on its journey to the 3DS, and the graphics are actually really impressive in 3D. Fair warning though, this game is kind of freaky at times, like, not gonna lie. How was it rated E? I don't know. So the next game is called Majora's Mask. Majora's Mask is the direct sequel to Ocarina of Time. The game takes place in a parallel world to Hyrule called Termina that is threatened to be crushed by the moon in only 3 days. In order to save the world of Termina, Link has to travel through time to awaken the 4 giants who have the power to stop the moon from crushing the Earth. In this game, you don't really have classic items like the boomerang or the slingshot. Instead, Link gathers a collection of masks, each of which have different magical powers. Some of the masks can even transform Link into an entirely different being, giving him new powers unlike he's ever experienced. The masks in this game offer unique and new opportunities for puzzles and boss battles that differ from those previously seen in the series. Another aspect of the game that separates it from the previous games is that there's a time limit. Yes, if you don't complete your quest in time, you literally get to watch the world end. It's terrifying. On that note, this entire game is a bit terrifying. Needless to say, this game truly haunted my nightmares as a kid. But now that I'm older, I think that the creepy nature of the game is nothing short of awesome. This game is absolutely worth your time. However, I don't recommend it as your first Zelda game. It's one of the more difficult games in the series, particularly because of the time limit. So, I think that you should wait a little bit longer until you've played other Zelda games before you try this one out. In my opinion, you should at least play Ocarina of Time before you play this one, but that's just my opinion. There is a 3DS remake of this game as well, and it's definitely worth your time if you get around to it. After Majora's Mask are the games Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages. The Oracle games are twin games that were released at the same time, similar to how the Pokemon games work. And like the Pokemon games, you can use one game to unlock features in the other game. In Oracle of Seasons, Link uses the magical Rod of Seasons to control the world around him. With this power, he can switch the overworld between the 4 seasons, spring, summer, fall, and winter, in order to solve puzzles and progress in the story. In Oracle of Ages, Link uses the Harp of Ages to travel between the past and the present in order to do the same thing. I'm ashamed to say that I honestly haven't played very much of these games, so I don't know whether or not I should recommend them as your first Zelda experience or not, but from what I've seen on the internet, these games are loved by many fans, and I hope to finish them someday. A lot of people are hoping that these games will be remade for the Switch in the new Link's Awakening style, and I think that would be awesome. Up next is The Wind Waker. The Wind Waker is another one of the most popular games in the series, and one of my personal favorites. This game is the first game to take place in an overworld that isn't based on land. The second half of the game is actually an open world game, similar to the original game, and sailing across the Great Sea is a perfect match for such a setting. In this game, Link's sister is kidnapped by Ganondorf, who mistook her for Princess Zelda. While on a quest to rescue her, Link discovers that he is the descendant of the hero of Legend, and that the Kingdom of Legend lies sunken at the bottom of the sea. He has to gather the 8 shattered pieces of the Triforce of Courage in order to awaken his true power and stop Ganondorf. Sound kind of familiar? This game would definitely be an awesome first game, and I highly recommend it. I love this game so much, I've actually completed a randomizer of it. Twice. Once with Celeste. This game was remade in HD for the Wii U, and the HD version is absolutely gorgeous, and it plays even better than the first one. So, the next game is Four Swords. This game is a lot different than the other games in the series. It was the first game that focused on multiplayer. At the beginning of the game, Link discovers a magical sword called the Four Sword hidden in the forest. After pulling it from its pedestal, the evil magician named Vati breaks free and kidnaps Princess Zelda. With the power of the Four Sword, Link is split into 4 people. With this new power, he has to awaken the great fairies who will help him rescue Zelda from Vati. So, like I said, this game is multiplayer. With 2 to 4 people, you could work together to conquer dungeons and fight bosses. This game is fine, I don't have anything against it, but it's not very story-rich, which is kind of a turnoff for me when it comes to Zelda games, and I personally prefer single-player games over multiplayer games, so if it was me, I would honestly just skip this one. It's not a bad game, though. The sequel to Four Swords is Four Swords Adventures. In this game, Link assists Princess Zelda by using the power of the Four Sword to stop Shadow Link and Vati from destroying the Kingdom of Hyrule. This game is, once again, multiplayer based, so it's not my favorite. I finished the Game Boy game Four Swords. I actually never finished this one, despite it being the objectively better game. So, like the one before, this game isn't by any means a bad game, it's just not as good as the other Zelda games in the series, in my opinion. So, if it were me, I would just skip this one. So let's move on to the Minish Cap. This game is one of the best handheld games in the series, and one of the best games in the series as a whole. It is so charming and addicting to play, and it's one of my favorites. The game tells the origin story of how the magical Four Sword came to be. In this game, Link can transform from his normal size to the tiny size of the Minish people. The mechanic of being able to transform into a tiny Link offers many new and unique puzzles and battles unlike the series has ever seen before. This game is absolutely worth a playthrough, and I think it would be a solid first choice for a Zelda game. Minish Cap is actually a bit underrated. Lots of Zelda fans haven't even played this one, so if you're one of them, you need to check it out as soon as you can. Next up is the famous Twilight Princess. After several years of releasing Zelda games with a cartoony style, Nintendo released this game with a dark and realistic style, and it's beautiful. This game is undoubtedly one of the best in the series. In Twilight Princess, Link must transform from his human form and his wolf form in order to restore balance to the Light Kingdom and the Twilight Kingdom. In this game, Link also trains in combat with the spirit of one of his past incarnations, which is super cool. The dungeons, combat, and storyline in this game are even more intricate and complex than any other previous title in the series up to this point. You can tell this game was created with slightly older audiences in mind, but really no matter your age, I think this game is a masterpiece to anyone who plays it. I think this game would be a totally solid first choice for a Zelda game. For a lot of fans, it was their first Zelda game. There is an HD re-release of this game on the Wii U, but it's not really that different than the original version. So any version of this game is a solid choice. Just give it a shot because it's so good. Now we're entering the Nintendo DS era, starting with Phantom Hourglass. This game's storyline takes place after The Wind Waker. Link and his gang are sailing the seas searching for new land when Link's friend is suddenly turned to stone after boarding a haunted ghost ship. In order to save her, Link seeks out the help of the magical Ocean King. This game is completely controlled by the stylus and the Nintendo DS touchscreen. A lot of fans strongly dislike this control system, but I personally don't mind it, maybe because I grew up playing the DS Zelda games. This game isn't really bad, but it does suffer from some pretty big flaws. First, this game holds your hand a lot. In other words, this game tells you exactly how to solve puzzles or fight enemies, whereas in previous entries, you had to gather clues in order to figure it out on your own. Another flaw that this game suffers from is simply a bad soundtrack. The Zelda series is famous for having gorgeous and epic background music, but this game's soundtrack is so bland, using mostly recycled songs or just 10-second loops of the same melody, that it's just not the same. I mean, just listen to this. Another aspect of the game that a lot of people disliked is that there is a dungeon in the game called the Temple of the Ocean King that you have to return to over and over and repeat the same levels that you completed before. In short, this game isn't really worth your time. Even though I personally have good nostalgic memories with this game, I can see why it's one of the least popular in the series, so don't worry about it. The second game released on the DS is Spirit Tracks. This game takes place in the new world that Link and his crew were searching for at the beginning of the previous game. In this game, Link and Zelda work together to restore the Spirit Tracks in order to stop the evil Chancellor Cole from resurrecting the Demon King, Molatus. Something unique about this game is that you travel around the overworld on a train, a method of travel never before seen in the series. Despite being controlled entirely by the touchscreen like the previous game, Spirit Tracks fixes a lot of the problems that Phantom Hourglass had, in my opinion. First, you don't have to return to the same dungeon over and over. That was a big complaint fans had about Phantom Hourglass, and it was a relief to many when they realized that that style of dungeon wasn't returning. Second, this game has a phenomenal soundtrack. Spirit Tracks is actually probably one of the games with my favorite soundtracks of all time. Finally, this game doesn't hold your hand and guide you through exactly what you're supposed to do like Phantom Hourglass did. In my opinion, this game is significantly more difficult than Phantom Hourglass, and you have to gather clues in order to solve puzzles and battle enemies like a classic Zelda game. In short, I believe this game to be a generally better game than Phantom Hourglass. You can also play as Princess Zelda in this game, something that fans had been asking for years. Since Princess Zelda is, well, dead in this game, she can actually use her spirit to possess monsters, which you can then control. It's super awesome, albeit a bit disturbing. A lot of fans didn't even give this game a fair chance after the disastrous Phantom Hourglass, which I think is a bit of an injustice. If you don't mind the touchscreen controls, I think people should give this game a shot. As for whether or not this would make a good first game, well, I think it's a solid, fun experience. However, its controls are very different from what is traditional, and the story is quite a bit different than what is traditional. So I would recommend playing this a little bit further along in your Zelda journey. Our next game is Skyward Sword. This game is a story-rich experience that tells the origin story of the Legend of Zelda series as a whole. This game has a gorgeous watercolor art style, and the overworld actually takes place in the sky. In Skyward Sword, Link and the people of Skyloft have never before descended to the surface of the earth below them, living safely in their city in the sky. Until one day, Zelda, who is not yet a princess in this story, is taken by a dark storm and falls to the land below them. The knight in training, Link, immediately sets off on a grand adventure to find her. This game is considered to be an incredible work of art by some, and a piece of trash by others. Let me explain. This game is almost entirely controlled by motion controls. Instead of pressing a button to swing your sword or shoot your slingshot like in previous games, you actually have to physically swing your Wii remote in order to do so in this game. Some people, like myself, really liked this new control system, while others didn't enjoy it at all. Nintendo seemed to realize this since they've announced that Skyward Sword HD will include joystick controls as an alternative to motion controls, which I think it's awesome that Nintendo was willing to do that. Nintendo is unfortunately not a company that listens to their fans often, so the fact that they're doing this says a lot. Another controversial aspect of Skyward Sword is that due to its story-rich nature, the game at times suffers from extreme hand-holding, having you complete almost every task in a specific order. Again, this doesn't bother me that much as I play a lot of linear story-based games, but I can see how this would be bothersome to those who are used to a more open-world experience. Something that I think people need to understand is that Skyward Sword was meant to be an introduction to the series for any new players who are interested in the Zelda series, which is why I believe Nintendo added so many not so helpful hints throughout the game. If you'd like to hear a fantastic video on this subject, please check out Steve Gaming's video called Why Galaxy Succeeds Where Skyward Sword Fails Miserably. I'll put the link in the description. I have one more flaw in Skyward Sword that I feel I must warn you about. Your companion in the game, a sword spirit named Fi, will interrupt your dungeon crawling to give you slightly excessive hints. Fi will even tell you when your Wii Remote batteries are running low, or when your character's health is running low. It's an uncomfortable addition to this game when previous games would tell you the exact same thing with a simple icon or a sound effect. I'm really hoping that Nintendo got rid of Fi's over-helpfulness in Skyward Sword HD. There are two ways I think they could do this. They could get rid of these interruptions by Fi entirely, the preferable option, or have her text appear as you're playing the game. Similar to how in 3D Mario games, Mario's companions such as Flood or Cappy talk to you by giving you hints without interrupting the gameplay. I think that either of these solutions would help the game tremendously. But despite all these flaws, I truly love this game. It's a beautiful game, like I said. In short, Skyward Sword would be an excellent first experience with the Zelda series, especially if you're particularly interested in the lore and the story, but only if you have the patience, because it takes a lot of patience. If motion controls and little gameplay interruptions annoy you to no end, I think you're better off skipping this one, honestly. If you're willing to wait a few months, maybe try checking out Skyward Sword HD. Next up is A Link Between Worlds. This game is the spiritual successor to the classic Zelda game, A Link to the Past. A Link Between Worlds takes place in the same Hyrule as A Link to the Past, and once again you have to travel between the Light World and the Dark World, which is now called Lorule, in order to stop the evil magician named Yuga. This game has a unique mechanic in which your character can merge into walls. This new idea offers a lot of new puzzles unlike the series has seen before. A lot of this game is open world exploration based, and the items function differently than in previous games as well. Instead of finding new items inside the dungeons, you can rent or buy the items from a mysterious shopkeeper named Ravio at almost any time in the game. This game is objectively the best Zelda handheld game that there is, and one of the best in the series. I think this game would be an excellent first choice for a game, despite being somewhat of a sequel to a previous game. Speaking of, no, you don't have to play Link to the Past before playing this one by any means. However, playing Link to the Past first might make your playthrough of Link Between Worlds a little more special. So the next one is Triforce Heroes. I didn't play this one. When I saw Link wearing a cheerleader outfit in the trailer, I just immediately lost interest. In my defense, this game is another multiplayer-based game, so I probably wouldn't have played it anyway. Sorry, I can't give you a recommendation on whether this game is good or not because I don't know, and frankly, I don't care. Finally, we've made it to the most recent game in the Legend of Zelda series, Breath of the Wild. This game is an absolute masterpiece. This game and Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door are pretty much tied for my personal favorite video game of all time. Breath of the Wild takes place in a peaceful yet broken world suffering from the effects of a devastating war against Calamity Ganon that occurred 100 years ago. At the beginning of the game, Link awakes inside a mysterious shrine only to find he has no memory of the war against Calamity Ganon. With the aid of an item called the Sheikah Slate, Link travels across Hyrule, gathering his memories and growing in strength so that he can return to Hyrule Castle, where Princess Zelda has been keeping the Calamity Ganon at bay for the last century. Breath of the Wild throws the traditional Zelda formula out the window and returns to its roots. It's 100% an open world game, meaning that you can complete the story in any order that you want, and all at your own pace. There are 4 main dungeons in this game and a grand total of 120 mini dungeons, called shrines. On top of this, there are hundreds of side quests and secrets to discover throughout your adventure. Breath of the Wild is probably the biggest content-filled gaming adventure I've ever experienced. This game just throws you right into the action immediately after you awaken from your 100-year sleep, giving you all the items right at the beginning of your adventure. In this game, the items are actually called runes, and these runes are the most unique Zelda items I've ever seen. The puzzles and combat in this game differ almost entirely from that in the previous games. Some players might use the runes in an entirely different way than you do, making every person's playthrough of this somewhat unique. This game is a work of art, to be honest. So, funny story. My dad grew up playing the original Legend of Zelda game all the time. He loves that game. And as time has passed, he has tried to get into some of the newer Zelda games, but he never really enjoyed any of them like he did the original Zelda game. Then Breath of the Wild came out, and my dad was obsessed. He's beaten the game several times, and he's even collected all 900 Korok seeds in the game. He loves Breath of the Wild. The reason I'm telling you this story is to show that this game really does return to its roots, creating an open world adventure just like the original game. I know I need to stop gushing about it, but Breath of the Wild is just so good. And there's a confirmed sequel in development. I don't think I've ever been more excited for a game ever. Play this game. I can't emphasize it enough. Breath of the Wild would be an incredible first experience with the Zelda series. But if you do go this route, keep in mind that Breath of the Wild doesn't follow the traditional Zelda formula. So if you play this game and then play an older game afterwards, you might not expect the linear progression of the story. But at the end of the day, I think that both traditional Zelda games and open world Zelda games are fantastic, and I honestly love almost every game in the series. So, what do you think? Have I helped you choose a Zelda game? I hope so. In short, I think that these games would be my first choice for a first-time Zelda player. But these games are a close second choice. As for these games, they're definitely worth your time, but maybe not as your first Zelda game. And then as for these games, don't worry about them. Honestly, don't worry about them. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that this video was helpful to someone out there. I truly hope that Nintendo plans on giving the Legend of Zelda series its turn in the spotlight for its 35th anniversary, like what they did for Super Mario. But most importantly, I hope Nintendo gives us news about Breath of the Wild 2 soon, because I think I'm gonna perish if I don't hear any news soon. I'm very much looking forward to Skyward Sword HD, and I truly hope Nintendo fixes some of the game's biggest flaws. Thank you guys so much for 100 subscribers. We honestly didn't think we would get this far. We're just trying to have fun here at Purple Peaches, and we hope to try lots of different kinds of videos just for fun, and we appreciate you for sticking around. So that's it for today. Thanks for watching, and stay peachy! Hey guys, thanks so much for watching again. I just finished the video. I wanted to finish this video about 2 months ago, but you know, life happens. I've been really obsessed with video essays lately, so this was my first attempt at one. So thank you so much if you made it all the way to the end and was able to bear the incredibly cringy sound of my voice. You are amazing, and I'll see you guys next time.